Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. And I think everyone is in the session now. If you could start off muting yourself, and then as you have questions throughout this session, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask. I don't want it to feel like this is a monologue and that I am just talking at you forever, and then you have to wait to ask your questions. You are welcome to unmute yourself and ask a question, or you are welcome to just put the question in the chat, whichever you prefer is fine with me. We have Abrian here who will be monitoring the chat, and I can also see it as well. So please feel free to do that. My name is Marissa Loon Bastian. I am the Associate Director of Academic Support here at JU. I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about this first year for your student. You may also want to not share your video. You can, but for the most part, it's probably mostly just going to be everybody looking at me, which is strange but weird, and also my screen. So you should just see a tiny me and then the larger of my screen, which should say right now first year college families with my name and title, and where I did my my post-secondary education, which was, as you can see, is up north in Massachusetts, which is where I'm from originally. All right, so we are going to continue on here. So welcome again to JU. I wish that we were welcoming you to campus. That would be much more exciting for us all. In case you can see me moving that around. What we're going to talk about today is some of your concerns for the upcoming year, some of your students' concerns, just standard things that we normally talk about for the first year, whether off to college, this is potentially your first student going to JU, or this is at least this student going to JU, whether you have another student who's coming here. So it's different for every student. So we always like talking about the first year and what you can expect and things to think about and whatnot. Obviously, this is a special year for us all, for sure. You know, COVID sort of changes things a little bit. So we can certainly talk about that as much as we can. I don't have all of the answers, but I can certainly do my best to answer anything that we talk about that may be different this year for whatever reason. So normally we're talking about what you're thinking about during orientation when you're on campus with your student and what they're thinking about. I think that this year, more than any other year, you and your student are probably a little bit more aligned in what you're worried about and what your concerns are. I think that this year is probably the one that is the closest, you're going to be closest to thinking the same or similar things. In general, though, your student is still right now probably mostly worried about who's going to be cute, who's going to be my friend, who am I going to talk to, who is going to be my roommate. They probably know that by now. Am I going to like them? That's always up for debate, right? You don't know until you get here how that's going to go. Normally it's who's going to sit with me in the dining hall. Now it's probably how am I going to sit in the dining hall? What's that going to look like? That might be a question that they're thinking about. You know, who am I going to be following on social media? How, you know, who's going to be my friend? Although I think most of them don't use Facebook anymore, and that's for the rest of us. We're using Facebook. They're on Instagram and Snapchat and maybe TikTok. I don't fully understand TikTok. I will admit, there's just enough of an age gap now for me where I have a little bit over almost 15 years between me, or about 15 years, a little more between me and them, and I don't know what TikTok is. You're probably worried about your students' health, I would say, especially this year. That's a normal concern we have listed, but that is especially, I would guess, paramount this year. Their general safety, right? If they're going off, they're far from home. What's Jacksonville like? Are they going to be safe on campus? Things like that. Paying for college, their academic success, right? You're sending them off to school. You want them to have fun, but you want them to do well. So thinking and worried about that, and just their overall happiness, right? That is certainly something that you're worried about and you're thinking about. And so are they. They want to be happy too. So these are just some of the differences, I think, between you and your student and how you might be feeling right about now. I think over the coming weeks, as we get closer to being on campus, you'll probably get even closer to some of these, you know, some of these concerns. But perhaps right now, still in the middle of July, you might be on slightly different spectrums. Some of the things to think about for for this next year, right? So your student might be 17, they might be 18, they might be 19, kind of depending on when they started school and whatnot. And these are some of the potential growing pains that they may go through over the course of the next year or so. This list was compiled by two colleagues of mine who are out of Rhode Island at Bryant University. They have been working in higher education for over 20 years each. It's probably closer to 30 years each now. And they both have college age students. So they have both worked with college age students for many years and have lived and their book is actually pretty wonderful. So this is your student going off, your first student, your first child going off to school. I highly recommend because it really kind of puts things in perspective. So some of the issues, right, your student might experience some roommate relationships, especially if they've never shared a room before. I did briefly with my brother when they were building our house that we moved into when I was about 11. I had never shared a room with him, and I hadn't shared a room with anyone after that until college. So that was definitely an interesting experience to navigate. And your student may experience something similar. Privacy issues, right? So sharing a bathroom with just your roommates versus sharing a bathroom with your family versus sharing a bathroom with an entire floor of people is definitely something that they're going to be experiencing and thinking about. They're going to be homesick, that there's going to be ebbs and flows to that for sure, especially depending on how far from home they are, how often you FaceTime, how often you let them FaceTime their dog. That's definitely, I highly recommend FaceTiming the dog. They're going to learn about how to communicate with their roommates, with their new friends, with professors, and how they speak with professors. There's going to be a different expectation, I think, than they maybe had in high school and talking to their teachers. So really learning that and how to navigate all of that. Social media presence, they are students that have had social media their entire educational lives, pretty much, certainly since middle school. So that for them is going to be thinking about, or they should be thinking about, what do I have on there now? What do I want to keep on there? And especially as I transition toward my career in school and thinking about that, just how does all this impact my educational experience? They may be thinking about joining Greek Life or just other organizations. So whether they're going to rush Greek or they just want to become involved, they have those different things to navigate and think about. So again, a lot of different, and every student's different. So all of these, your student may experience 2 of these growing pains, or they may experience all of them. And it may not all be the first year. It could be second year, it could be junior year. So there's no textbook way to get through the first year of school. And I think that it's all about being flexible and listening to your student and really just kind of being there and recognizing that there may be some of these issues and there may be none. And that's okay. If your student's doing fine, that's not a bad thing. It's totally okay. Again, if you have sort of any questions about any of this as we go along, please feel free to pop that in the chat or pop in and ask me. Either way, it's pretty straightforward for right now. This is what we call the calendar of stressors. So this is something that I always think is interesting to think about. And I have adjusted it this year for our adjusted academic calendar. Normally it looks a little bit different. Normally they come home for Thanksgiving and then they come back to school. That is not the plan for this year. So I have adjusted this to really be as hopefully accurate as we can for this academic year. So you're going to bring them to school middle of August. Or they're going to drive themselves, or they're going to get here and you're going to be sending them off. And it's going to be new unless they're from Jacksonville. But even still, if they're living on campus or they're just coming to campus regularly, it's still unfamiliar. It's still the unknown. Anyone who's seen Frozen 2 can start to sing that song to themselves. It is in my head. But instantly they're going to be more independent than they were the day before when they were with you. So that moment in August really changes things a lot. Their values are going to be tested. They're going to be put into situations that they weren't previously in necessarily. I can speak for myself in that I had a very sheltered high school experience. I managed to stay pretty sheltered, which was nice actually in hindsight. And so college was a little bit different. I had a lot to engage with. I had a lot to think about. And your student, depending on their high school experience, what their friends may or may not have enticed or asked them to participate in. You know, there's just going to be different things that they get tested on. They're going to meet so many different people from so many walks of life and different cultures and different countries and different states. So it's just, you know, it's an interesting and exciting time for your student to really learn about other people in a new and different way. It's probably going to be the first time that they're managing their own time and money, right? If you think about middle school and high school and before that even, their life was pretty scripted, especially if they were involved, whether they were an athlete or they were involved in something musical or whatnot. You know, their lives were pretty scripted. Their schedule was laid out for them. They didn't have too much free time probably, and they probably also didn't have their own credit card, which you may have them do, which is certainly not a bad idea. There's a lot of student credit cards that have very low limits. I think my first one was like $500, so I couldn't get into too much trouble, assuming I recognized that 500 meant stop there and don't keep going if you try. You know, so there's a lot of different expectations and different experiences for them to be navigating and thinking about. And these are conversations that you should probably start having now and thinking about some of them. October is a great care package month because they've been at school at that point. It'll be, you know, depending on when in October you're thinking about it, a month and a half to 2 months. You know, there's not going to be the long weekends like there sometimes are where they are hopefully coming home all the time or coming home to see you. Especially depending on how far away you are. That's always a critical sort of piece here with how often they see you, especially at least in person. But the honeymoon period's kind of over in October. Midterm exams happen. They get their midterm grades back, which can be a fraught experience, but can also be really empowering for them. So it really just depends. It just depends how it all goes. This is when they might start having conflicts with roommates or friends or their faculty. Just because they're stressed, and stress is what induces, you know, some of that anxiety and some of that tension. They're probably really homesick at this point. They're probably, if they have a pet, they are missing their pet. Not necessarily more than you, but it will feel like it, at least to them in the moment. They're definitely missing your home cooking by this point. I can tell you that. So they are looking forward to that. So any treat or any just, you know, little picture, note from their pet, note from you, a card, and something as small as a card, honestly. Snail mail, while it seems very archaic to them at times, I think once you hit college, you like being able to check your mailbox and get mail. So even if it's something small, it doesn't have to be this grandiose care package that you send them. This year, you know, things are pushing up a little bit. So November, which would normally be thinking about just going home for the break, is going to be actually thinking about finals and thinking about classes for spring. So they're going to be nervous and excited about going home for an extended period of time this year. But they're also probably extra stressed and anxious because there's a lot of deadlines to meet and all of this to happen before break and before they're preparing for that long break, you know, at home. So November is going to be a stressful month. December, they're going to be home with you. They might be taking a winter course. You know, they might be taking a class over the winter break. They're adjusting to that longer time away from their new friends, away from school. This sort of new normal that they got used to has been upended. January, again, we're starting a little bit later than normal. So, but you know, they're readjusting now to school after having been home for so long, reconnecting to campus, reconnecting to friends, getting used to being in, you know, with their roommates again. They may be excited or nervous about spring semester, depending on how fall semester goes. If fall was rough, they're probably a little nervous. If fall was great, then they're probably really excited. So, you know, just being there for them and recognizing that's a possibility. You'll notice the sort of beginning of or middle of a semester is always where it's really great to have a care package, that sort of second full month of school. So February or March, either of those would be great times. Again, midterms. One of those things should have been removed from February. There is no spring break, I believe is on the academic calendar that we are removing break this year, again, to try to just keep everybody safe, keep everybody healthy and all that. So that's less of an issue to worry about, the sort of funding of break and the rules of spring break. However, if they have friends who have a break, you know, they might feel like they're being gypped by something. But again, just sort of talking that through, really understanding what about break. You know, you just be home faster, you get things done quicker without a break in that way. But they might be a little bit tired by that point, especially without having that break. They might be a little salty if that they don't have a break. So just sort of recognizing that, and without, you don't have to validate it, but just, you know, letting them vent it out is always helpful. April and May are beautiful here in Jacksonville. So there's that spring fever. There's that time wanting to spend, you know, on the river, at the beach, whatever it might be, but also remembering that classes are happening. So, and then finals and fall registration are also going to happen then. So you can see kind of an ebb and flow, right? Each semester sort of mirrors itself, really, each other. But there's an ebb and flow to these stressors that happen sort of month by month. And you can actually see in that book, Sending Your Freshmen Off to Their First Year, they delve a lot more into even like some of the conversations that you might want to have each month and things like that. There's also a lot of resources online for you. Let's see. One really important item I want to talk about that you may not have heard yet in another session, but what is critical, you may remember from when your student was in high school that you got their grades. Their grades got sent to you. I remember them being sent in mail. There were not online portals when I was in school. I'm pretty sure that you probably have those now. That your students' grades can, if you know they're online, you have access to this portal. There's a parent portal, or they are still getting mailed home. And it's usually, I remember, to the parents of. I remember this vividly. I remember thinking, but they're my grades. Why are they going to my parents? I did not know about FERPA at the time, because why would you as a high school student? FERPA is the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. This originally in high school granted you the authority to maintain control of your students' educational record. That is no longer the case. This is usually when I'm in person and I can see your faces, that the faces are not happy. I'm just going to pretend and assume that that's what your face might look like now. So basically what FERPA means is that a student's educational record, so whatever that is, there's a variety of items that are included in that. Their course grades, their tutoring records, you know, their advising appointments, different things. Various records are included in FERPA. The big one is always grades though, whether it's midterm or final. When a student either turns 18 or enters post-secondary school, whichever happens first, the authority of records, of educational records, transfers to the student. So you used to have control, but until whether they turn 18 or go off to JU first, whichever one happens first, they're in control now. So if you were to call JU and ask the advising center office or ask the registrar's office for your student's grade or any question about that, they cannot release that information to you unless your student, again, is that your student has signed the authorization to release education records to a third-party form. This is a form that exists both there's a hard copy version or there's an e-form. If your student goes to their MyJU portal, that is where they can access the e-form. And they can also access, sorry, my headphones are dying. Let me try, can everyone still hear me? Sorry. Can we hear me now? Let me pop back into this chat and see if you can hear me now. Yes, we can hear me now. Okay, sorry about that. My AirPods died and technology fail. So FERPA, the most important part, and you'll ask me on that. So you're going to want your student to go to either MyJU and fill out the e-form, or there is a form on the registrar's page on the website, which looks, whenever it downloads, I will show you. And it's just a form that your student has to fill out for you to be able to be given any information related to your student's educational records. So if you were to call a professor, an advisor, tutoring center, whatever it is, none of us can tell you anything until we check to see if this form is on file and has been signed. Now, I will tell you that if they fill it out now or in August before school starts, whenever it is, they can revoke that form at any time. So if midterm grades happens and they are not happy with their grades and they're a little nervous, they may revoke that. Most students don't realize that they can do this, which is to your benefit. But again, just as a heads up for you all that that is something that is happening. Oops. Some things you might want to talk to your student about sort of before sending them off to us, or just thinking about yourself. Helping your student become more autonomous and really more independent and more empowered. You may or may not have been more or less involved in their high school experience. You know, parent-teacher conferences were a thing back, you know, when they were in, I'm guessing more like elementary school and maybe middle school. I don't think that happens so much in high school, but that's not going to happen now. And the faculty are more than likely not going to want to talk to you because they want it to go through this student. So really just sort of having those conversations with your student now about keeping you informed. You know, we want you to be informed. We would just love it for it to come from your student. So, you know, having conversations about that is always great. Helping them to foster resilience and mental toughness. You know, it's sort of a thing you can't necessarily know how they're going to react to school until they're there. I didn't know how I was going to be. I thought I was going to be fine. I was all 40 minutes from home. And yes, sorry, I see the question about what if as a child is under 18 years. Yes. So I was 17 when I started college. My parents did immediately as lost access. So the rule is whether your student turns 18, whichever happens first, your student turns 18 or they begin college or university. So whichever happens first is when the authority transfers. So even if they start at 17, it's still going to be them. It's going to transfer to them because they have that authority now. It's just the rule that they decided. You would think it would be 18, but the fact that they're in college now makes it them. Talk about how often you're going to communicate. You know, if you expect to talk every single day, but they expect to only talk once every 2 weeks, you know, really just sort of expectations. Setting expectations is important because if you have expectations, but the other person doesn't know that, you're doomed to disappointment. So really always just making sure you guys are on the same page. This is not an exhaustive list, but this is a list of campus resources just for you to be aware of. So these are some of the places that your student can go and should go to get help, ask questions, just various resources available to them. So academic advising, their faculty are a huge resource. If your student had an IEP or 504 plan in high school, you're going to want to make sure that you and they connect with disability support services. While we don't have IEPs and 504s in college, there are still accommodations. So it just looks different and is just done a little bit differently. But Olga Flores out of DSS is who you're going to want to talk to for that. So, you know, making sure that your student knows about that resource. The Counseling Center is a wonderful group of people that work with students for all different reasons. The registrar's office is where they always want to go if they have a question about adding a class, dropping a class, withdrawing from a class, anything related to that. Student Inclusion is a wonderful office that works to make sure we are an inclusive and diverse campus and that we understand, respect, and learn about each other. So Patrice Abner is in charge of that and is wonderful. We have Experiential Learning Office on campus because there is an experiential learning requirement for your student before they graduate. We've got a great staff on our library. Our academic technology team are great, which is not the same as information technology. So academic tech is going to be if your student has a question about Blackboard and using Blackboard and accessing their courses and things like that. Information tech is going to be if they have a question about their email, their computer, different things like that, just to kind of clarify between the two. We have great career resources for your student. We have student athlete support services. So if your student is a student athlete, regardless of whether or not they play this year, that remains to be seen, I believe. But there are support services and advising and, you know, support there specifically for them because they have their own set of expectations and challenges and pressures. So, you know, there's a whole team there to support them. Maybe your student is part of our NROTC program, which is connected to the Navy. It's a wonderful program, and again, a wonderful support system for students there as well. Oops, my apologies. Shameless plug for my own office, which is academic support. So we're the peer tutoring office on campus. This year, we will have both in-person and virtual to accommodate whatever students are most comfortable with. If they are comfortable coming in person and rocking that mask and working with another student, then that's fine. Or we're gonna have a virtual option where they can be on a screen, very similar to Zoom, shared whiteboard, shared all sorts of calculator and technology, all different things like that. A lot of students, I think about a quarter of the students, tend to come to tutoring at some point in their career. All of our tutors are also students. So if your student is ever interested, it is a paid job on campus. They don't have to have federal work study or anything like that. So it's pretty wonderful for our tutors to be able to work with their classmates, to work with fellow JU students towards success. It's something that we, I think as an institution, pride ourselves on, is that regardless of whether it's in a formal way as a job or if it's just naturally, organically happens in class or in a room, our students are really supportive of each other. So that's something you're going to see as a through line through a lot of the offices and people that you talk to at JU. This is just my shameless plug for my own office because again, it is, I think, a critical piece to academic success for students. So that we are there for you. All of our information is on our website and will be updated as we get more information, which is going to be true for all of the offices I just talked about. All of us here, all of these offices, we've had one way of doing things for years, probably. This year may change things for different offices. There will be different services available or just different ways that we are able to deliver our services. So just asking your student, to be patient and so work with each office. But again, the support will still be there. It might just look slightly different this year. How to support your student. So if this is especially your first student going off to college, this is hard. And I'm not a parent, so it's easy for me to say it. But I was on the other side and I was the student. So I'm gonna just recommend that you try to do your best to accept the changing role that you have now as a parent. It doesn't stop, you're still their parent. They're still gonna ask you questions. I am 34 years old and still call my mother with things. I'm like, Mom, so that day I left the iron on, do I have to go home and turn it off? Is there an auto? Like, this is literally a question that happened probably 2 years ago. Or no, that was last year. And so, you're still their parent. They're still going to have questions, but they're spreading their wings and they're figuring things out. And they're probably like when your child started to walk or when they were a toddler and they needed to figure out how to do it on their own and they didn't want you to show them. I can think of my nieces and nephews yelling. Sort of similar now, they're going to want to figure some things out on their own, and other things are going to really want to know your opinion. And so you're there. So don't worry too much. If at the beginning it might be a little quiet, but then you might want. My mom probably wanted to shut me up. I called her every day of college, and I liked college, but I just called her every day. There was something new that happened every day. I felt like she needed to know. She probably didn't, but she indulged me. So there's that. I highly encourage you to become familiar with our resources here at JU. Again, the list I shared, and there's more beyond that, just so you know who your student can go to. You're going to feel better the more informed you are. And so that I just always recommend, getting to know the resources that are available. Especially your student might ask you, because again, they're your parents. So we expect our parents to just know all the things. And so even if they could ask somebody on campus, oh, where do I go for this? They may very well ask you. And you might feel really cool if you know the answer. Or you might want to be like, where can you go to find that out? Either way, whatever feels right to you with your student. Be prepared for those vent session calls. There's going to be something that annoys them or they're going to be really stressed. So just be prepared for some of those calls. They're definitely going to happen. And who knows what topic they'll be about. Could be about a roommate, could be about a friend, could be about the weather. Because hurricane season is upon us, so who knows what it could be about, but they might have some frustrations coming up this fall. It's always good, you've done this your child's whole life. Help them keep disappointments in perspective. Failing one quiz does not mean they're a bad student. Whatever it might be that they're disappointed about, put it in perspective. Things you've always done for your student, just keep doing them. They're gonna be appreciative of that for sure. Setting expectations for your student too, I think is important. Again, about communication. If they have certain financial aid, whether it's scholarships or just even loans or grants or whatever, there are going to be different requirements that they need to uphold. So, just talking to your student about expectations that you have as a family for them, that those are reasonable conversations to have for sure. I highly recommend sympathy and empathy, but not fixing. So encouraging your student, if they have a concern, if they have a gripe, they have a question, they have a frustration, they have something that they think is an issue, really encouraging them to locate the right person to talk to on campus about it, to correct it or process it, whatever it might be. I highly recommend, helping them to that easing them into adulting, as I call it, sort of that end of things. Being supportive of academic progress and not just grades is something I always try to talk about too, because grades do not always reflect how hard your student is trying or how much they're actually learning. There are certain subjects or certain things that in ourselves we put up these blocks, and we might actually be learning, but we just don't get the grade that we want or the grade that we wish we would get. And so, talking to them about what they're learning and not just what their grades are, I think is a really good way of showing your student that they don't have to just get good grades, that they can learn. And, we want them to get good grades, but it is not the only thing that we're measuring them on. It's also really important that you're going to talk about home rules for when they return for winter break and thinking about what that looks like, because they got used to being on their own. So what does it look like to be home? And to think about all of these things. After winter break, they're going to come back for spring. And, you just want to make sure that you're supporting them regardless of how fall went. It may have been great. It may have not been amazing. There's a learning curve. So, really just supporting them regardless of what the fall semester looked like. Making sure they're thinking about housing for the next year, because that happens in the spring. Just more listening, more support, always communicating. Maybe they're thinking about an internship for the summer, so making sure they talk to career resources and figuring, and their faculty are also great resources for working on internships. So thinking about the summer. I'm not saying, January 25th when you drop them off, we start talking about summer, but, sort of as spring goes on, it's always a great time to talk to them about these things. This slide here can be appropriate for right now because it is summer, or next summer, either way. Thinking about, well, especially the top part will be for next summer, but recognizing that they've had a whole year now where they've started to mature. Hopefully they've started to become more self-reliant. So, start talking to them, as the adult that they are becoming and that they are. You're talking about finances, talking about relationships. There's all different things that you can, make sure help your student to continue to become that awesome, active, engaged adult that you have been working on for the last 18 years. Moving and storage issues are always a question. So thinking about that at the end of the year, sort of what you want. What do you want to do? Are they going to bring everything home? Are you going to maybe get a storage unit here? Sort of thinking about these things and all of that. I think we're all that dog right about now. We're at that point in the summer. Here are some resources for you to prepare yourself for your homework, if you will, to get ready for the year. So the registrar's office, I'm going to check the chat really quick. Okay, nothing for me specifically, so we'll continue on and then I'll get to it later. So the registrar's website is there. I'm not sure if there's a way for us, Kristen or Abrian, to share this PowerPoint with folks if they want it. You can also email me always. So it's mloon@ju.edu. That should mloon, and I can put that in the chat after. You can email me and I will happily send you this PowerPoint if you want any of these links and whatnot. But the registrar's office is a great place to just know where it is. A lot of information there. Again, they'll have the academic calendar. They will have that FERPA form, so you get to be informed. The advising website is great. It's got information about, sort of a weekly schedule planner, helping your student kind of map out, okay, what's your week going to look like? Helping them through these things. And if you work on them with them in the summer, you're going to feel a little bit more involved than you will once they're here, but you'll have been part of that process with them, which is, I think, always a great experience. Residential life is where you're going to want to go for all of that housing, all the housing questions, all the housing information. They've got a great team there. Student financial services. So any scholarship, financial aid, federal work study, billing, any of those questions, student financial services are your go-to people. There are wonderful counselors in there who will be able to answer any of your questions as relate to your specific, package, because everyone's situation is different. So they're going to have the answers specific to your student. And then there's just a couple. There's that book I mentioned, and there's a bunch. Collegeparents.org, collegeparentscentral.com. These are great websites because you are not alone. There is a whole network of parents out there who are, or family and guardians, and however you are connected to your student, they're out there to help you through this too. So it's wonderful resources out there. You are not alone. Do not suffer in silence. There's lots of people to ask questions to. I always just I like to remind families, your student's not the only one going to college. You're going, but staying home. And so reminding them to stay in touch with you, to stay in touch with their little sister, their little brother, maybe if they're really close to a cousin, even teachers from high school, if they were really close to someone. But, you getting in touch with them, and hopefully they're going to be getting in regular touch with you. No text is too short. No FaceTime is too short. It's really true. FaceTime is a beautiful thing. I think it's been important especially in the last probably 4 or 5 months, Zoom and FaceTime have been critical for a lot of us keeping in touch. And so just keeping that up, with your student when they get here is always a good plan. I'm going to check the chat again. If I can ever, there we go. I don't know if you can actually see the chat when I open it up, but we're going to find out. All right. Roommate questions. So again, that's definitely going to be a residential life. You're going to want to go to residential life for that question. How do we navigate through the campus since we don't really know where classes are? I'm not sure exactly, Hasina, if you're still on the call and you want to ask a clarifying question of what that means. There is a campus map, so you can see where all the buildings are. So if your student is like, where isn't this class? I don't know where I have to go for that. There's a campus map, so you can look together and see where all the buildings are. And their classes should have it listed on their course schedule in MyJU on WebAdvisor or Student Planning, where their classes are going to be located. Some of that might be still being worked out, but you will definitely be able to see that on the campus map, which is on the website. And as Kristen or Abrian said, the virtual tour, which is awesome. You'll be able to see what everything looks like. FERPA, Counseling Center free. Thank you for that plug. Just seeing if there's any other, okay, there's my email, perfect. So you can get that. The waiver of insurance form, the waiver of health insurance, I'm guessing is what you are asking. Okay, that is a really good question. I'm thinking, because we have a new student health services opening up. I don't think that they would, I would say talk to the bursar. Okay, I'm seeing the bursar. The bursar's office, so BURSAR office. Bobby Brown is our bursar, is the person. So the bursar, or you could ask at your student's admissions counselor or student financial services. Honestly, most of those forms are going to go through there. You can also search the JU website, and sometimes you will find, if something like that you'll find, but I would check with, it seems like the bursar's office is the best to go to. And thank you, Dave Pittman, for sharing that link, which was sent to him by the bursar. So perfect. And then Hasina, your question about getting to class late for the first week. Not really. You don't really want to get to class late. Ideally, you'd still like to get there on time. Is that, so we're asking sort of, if you're just not sure where your class is, the class location will be on the student's schedule well before classes start. I think that it's a very fluid situation. So everyone is still just trying to figure out, where certain classes will take place. You know, if there may be labs that need to move, you know, there's just a couple of moving parts still, but before classes start, it will be confirmed the building, the room number for each of the students' classes. So the expectation that faculty will have is that they're pretty close to on time, maybe that first day, but otherwise that they would be expected to be there on time. And again, between the virtual tour that Adrian and Kristen mentioned in the chat, that will be there, that students can see all the different buildings, and then the campus map itself will also have, your student will be able to map out where they're going between each classes. And as was just mentioned, all the classroom buildings are pretty much about 5 to 10 minutes apart. The only exception to that being the new health sciences building, which is a little bit further apart. But typically students who have classes there, for the most part, the majority of their classes, a lot of the time, are in that building. That would be the only exception. And I'll be honest, a lot of our students, when they have classes over there, actually end up driving. It's not that far, but it's just far enough that most students drive. I'm not sure if that answered your question, Hasina, and I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Any other questions? If anyone wants to ask it in the chat or pop in. Again, this is a learning year for you and your students. Know that JU and all of the staff here, we're here to support you too. We're not just here to support your students. So if your question is FERPA related, we're gonna have to check that first. Otherwise, if you have general questions, if you want general advice, we are gonna answer that question regardless. We're gonna be here and you can call us and email us as many times as you have questions. We'll all answer them. And if we don't have that answer, we're gonna direct you to the right person who has that answer. But just recognize that you are now part of the JU family too, and your student and you are going to have all of these resources and all of the support from every office on campus, because that's what we're about here at JU. We never want you to feel like you're alone and you're uninformed or any of that. You can always ask questions. Are there any other questions? Basically, the long and the short of this presentation is it might be a tough year. There's going to be some tough moments for your student, and it's going to look different for every single student. At the end of the day, you are there to support your student. We are here to support your student. And we recognize this is a unique year in addition with everything related to COVID-19. And just know that everyone on campus who is preparing, and I can tell you that we are spending most of our days thinking about the fall, preparing for fall, trying to make sure that everything that we are doing, regardless of our office and regardless of what our specific function is. So for me, it's the tutoring program. You know, for Kristen and Ami, who you've been seeing in a lot of these presentations or been hearing from, you know, their office, they're trying to figure out things. So we're all working to make sure that your student has as vibrant and robust and as amazing an experience at JU next year, while also being safe and healthy and that component. So we're all working to make sure that you feel comfortable from home having your student here. If there are no other questions, I hope you all have a wonderful weekend and a great rest of your day. And we look forward to seeing you, or at least part of your face behind a mask, in August when your students come to campus, or when your student, you know, even if you're local. We hope to see you and hear from you, and are here again for any questions that you have. Hope you all have a wonderful day, a great weekend, rest of the summer, and we will see you in Jacksonville soon. Thank you so much.